It's not just Wuhan that Judicial Watch is investigating. We're having to investigate what's going on here in the United States. Judicial Watch has new documents that we uncovered through FOIA and just hard, heavy lifting through investigations. Documents that reveal photos and conditions in that illegal California lab. Actually, it was 2 labs owned by a Chinese company. We got 29 pages of documents through the California Public Records Act that confirm illicit labs owned by Chinese nationals house biologicals in hazardous and non-compliant conditions, multiple infectious agents, and starving and dead mice. Judicial Watch's investigators also uncovered court documents which detail the deplorable conditions of the lab, which also conducted COVID research. I think they were injecting COVID into the mice as part of selling tests or internet tests for COVID. The documents were produced by the Fresno County Department of Public Health in response to a request for records about this this California COVID, I call it the COVID lab. That's what they were doing. And it was owned by a prestige biotech, which is, had run the lab called University of Meditech. The records show that on May 31st, 2023, a health officer in the Fresno County Department of Public Health, so the labs were in Fresno, and then they moved to Reedley, California, which I guess is near Fresno. Of course, I don't know. I don't live in California. And it's Reedley, I think, is 200 miles, from San Francisco. So it's the good part of California, right? That's a good part of the state, right? Fresno. So anyway, I'm getting distracted by the geography of California. The order is issued as a result of the City of Reedley's attempt at gathering authorized representative contact information, repeated requests of complete lists of biologicals present, and an inspection pursuant to a health officer order dated April 21st, 2023, which revealed biologicals in hazardous and non-compliant conditions, the presence of multiple infectious agents, and pursuant to Title 17 California Code of Regulations, Section 2500, and multiple City of Reedley building and fire code violations, including but not limited to failing refrigeration and documented out-of-compliance electrical additions. So essentially, this was kind of like a pop-up lab that showed up, and I think a health inspector, I think I read an Associated Press report about it. The health inspector kind of accidentally found it because someone was complaining about parking violations at a warehouse facility, and they saw a garden hose or something and water, and basically the inspector sniffed around, and these Chinese nationals were running the lab. Now the AP was concerned that people were drawing negative inferences because they were Chinese nationals. Well, it's a Chinese company. And it's a communist government, so they're always involved in Chinese companies. Who are they kidding? So we got the report detailing how this was handled by the government. They seem to be doing a good job. And at the end of the report, the process began, according to the documents, in December of 2022. And they kicked it upstairs to the FBI and CDC, so they thought something was up. And the FBI said, just continue investigating it. Don't wait on us. And in July of 2023, there was an abatement warrant issued by the court, and in June, and then in July, biological materials in approximately 36 refrigerator freezers were properly removed and transported for destruction. Under the heading Next Steps in the documents, the presentation notes the investigations by the Health Department, the FDA, the California Department of Public Health, the Health Department's Food and Drug Branch, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency were ongoing. So I'll be interested to know what happens there. So we got the documents from Fresno, which provide detail on how they handled it. And we also, our investigator figured out how to get the court documents which disclose other details about what was in these labs, including the presence of dead mice. And, dead mice don't scare you, but they're dead because of poor lab conditions involving COVID and who knows what else. It should cause some concern. Exhibit 2, there's this abatement warrant I talked about. Exhibit 2 of the Declaration of Code Enforcement Officer Jesselyn Harper contains graphic images of dead mice from the mouse room at the Reedley facility. Now while I'm reading this, we're going to post some video of pictures of the dead mice. They're a little bit graphic. Would you think they're terribly graphic? Yeah. Well, anyway, if you don't like to see dead mice, don't look at them. Or be warned. You got 3 seconds to turn away. 1, 2, 3. Upon entering the mouse room, code enforcement and Dr. Hahn observed a large amount of mice feces on the floor. It was undeterminable if the feces were from wild mice or if the mice in the cages had begun to kick up feces out of the cages. But the photos of the feces were taken regardless because according to Dr. Hahn, it was very likely a mixture of both. See some dead mice there. Dr. Hahn confirmed the mice were in server distress because of barbering taking place. The high number of visible carcasses in the cage and the lack of pinkies. Barbering is a social activity with mice consistent with over-grooming. When under stress, the dominant mice will begin to rip the hair and skin off less dominant mice. The lack of pinkies can be related to starvation or stress because code enforcement had been trying to provide adequate food and water. It is believed cannibalism is due to stress. And so they killed the mice that were remaining. They euthanized them. So what does this story tell you? That Chinese biological research of some type is going on here in the United States. Americans should know that dangerous biological research doesn't just occur in Wuhan. And we've talked about how it's occurred elsewhere as well. And so I know you have seen stories about this. I shouldn't say I know you have seen. Maybe you're hearing about this for the first time. But it's been out there online, and you can trust Judicial Watch to try to get to the bottom of these questions that people have about these labs that were set up in California. And we have other information about other biological research that is concerning here in the United States. In November 2022, in April 2022, we received records from an agency that showed safety lapses and violations of U.S. Biosafety laboratories at U.S. Now I got myself confused. I feel like I'm turning into Joe Biden bit by bit. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Every time I screw up a word, it feels like, oh no, am I turning into Joe Biden? That revealed safety lapses and violations at U.S. Biosafety laboratories that conduct research on dangerous agents and toxins. There's NIH records revealing over 24 cases where research involved recombinant or synthetic nucleic acid molecules were conducted in America without proper approval or a violation of NIH guidelines. So this, gain of function research here in America. And then, of course, we had documents that showed that the Defense Department was funding anthrax laboratory activities in Ukraine, over $11 million in funding for Ukraine biolabs in 2019. And I don't understand why we're still funding that, why we're not shutting it down. And obviously the war in Ukraine has increased the risks to those labs, and a problem that could have been averted if we had just shut the darn labs down rather than funded their perpetual status of operation. I mean, this has been going on for 20 plus years. So it's not just Wuhan that Judicial Watch is investigating. We're having to investigate what's going on here in the United States. And then, of course, there are labs in Ukraine that also need monitoring. And I know every time I mention the word Ukraine that people say, well, you're on the side of the Russian. No, it's a fact. I mean, do you think we should be supporting anthrax laboratories in Ukraine? I don't. War or no war, I don't think we should be doing it. We should be shut down. So there's an ongoing investigation into this lab in California, and Judicial Watch is, again, right in the forefront of this illicit Chinese activity in California involving COVID. They were injecting mice with COVID according to reports, and you can see what happened to the mice. What in Lord's name was happening over there? The investigations continue, and we're going to be pressing for more information. You can be sure of that. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.